Hello. So finally got around to doing another video. Haven't been on YouTube for a while. I've recently been in Mongolia. I was there for 2 weeks. I think I talked about that a few months back. And I just want to talk a bit about my experiences. And I haven't planned this video out. I never really plan my videos, so it might be a bit rough, but oh well. So if I can remember, let me see, Mongolia, I did a 2-week tour in Mongolia with G Adventures, which was quite good. They sort of specialise in more adventure type holidays, more budget type, bit less expensive type holidays, and they tend to specialise in more remote areas as well, and also other places too, which was quite good. So I want to talk a bit about my experience there. So Mongolia, I went there, I got there, we started off in the capital city, which is Ulaanbaatar, or UB, as people call it, in UB. So I was there for probably about 2 days at first, being summertime over there now. Weather was quite nice, in the beginning at least. Had a bit of rain and wind and wet towards the end. The capital city is quite interesting. It's obviously developing, but there is still quite a bit happening there. I mean, it's a city. It's like other cities around the world, and there's a lot of things to do: bars, restaurants, nightclubs, and things like that. It's certainly not boring. Which is quite interesting. So you sort of have like Mongolian and Oriental elements coming together with obviously the Soviet influence of the past. You can see that when you're there. The Soviet apartments and buildings and stuff like that. A bit of Soviet architecture, along with some modern architecture as well, and some of the temples, the Mongolian temples. Like there's a lot of Buddhist influence over there as well, as there are in many Asian countries. So leaving Ulaanbaatar, everything's quite busy, it's quite congested, the traffic's quite congested, but it's still a nice city in certain areas, in other parts it's not. Once you leave the city, there really isn't a lot happening, and you might drive for thousands of kilometers or hundreds of kilometers and not really see too much. We had a tour guide driving us, and they would drive in these Russian jeeps. And often when you leave the city, the roads aren't very good, or there aren't even roads. So you have like dirt track sort of thing. So we would, it was very bumpy ride. We would joke around and say that was like a Mongolian massage. It's kind of funny. So very bumpy roads, and you might drive thousands of Ks and not really see too much. Occasionally there might be a family or something living out in a gir. A gir is like a traditional nomadic Mongolian tent. They have them, they're called yurts in some other parts of Central Asia. So you might see one of these every now and then, or something, but there isn't a lot happening. There's a lot of horses and sheep and things like that out there as well. Yeah, so if you're into nature and you don't mind being out in the middle of nowhere, then it's definitely very peaceful. Landscape can change quite a bit too. Like in the Gobi Desert, it's quite dry and flat, and then you might move on and you think you're in the Sahara Desert with all these sand dunes and stuff, and then you might find yourself in wetter landscapes with more trees and things like that. Like you think you're in Canada or something. So it's quite interesting how the landscape changes, and the weather can change very quickly too. You can be feeling too hot, and all of a sudden you're freezing. Or it's wet or whatever. Generally, Mongolia is very dry, and it's a very dry cold and a very dry heat. But expect anything if you travel. So it's just the start. It was just the start of summer when I went. So there isn't a lot happening. A lot more tends to happen around the Naadam festival in July, I think it is, where they have like traditional events and stuff like that, like wrestling and archery and that sort of thing, and music. but nevertheless, it was quite good. The people were quite good as well. They are curious about foreigners, and they like it when you try to say something in their language. Of course, not many people learn Mongolian, so that was quite interesting. Food was quite good. It was sort of a lot of meat involved, but very nice. You have like, you know, horse meat, camel meat, things like that, mutton. What else can I say? Yeah, so obviously I think the place to be is in UB if you want to live there or you want to spend a bit of time there. I think there's probably not a lot happening in the winter time out of the city. I think they close up the gears and stuff like that. So best time is probably summer, and time to go is summer and autumn. But yeah, I guess you can visit the country any time of the year. What else? So I think I went at an interesting time. Mongolia seems to be developing quite a bit. I mean, especially in the city, there's a lot of buildings being built and things like that. A lot of new infrastructure. The city seems to be becoming more cosmopolitan and that sort of thing. And I would expect that a lot will probably happen in the next 5 years or so. But yeah, so overall, I won't go into too much more detail, but it was a very interesting trip. Obviously, if you have any questions, you can ask me. Also, I think it would probably potentially be a new place for me to possibly go and spend a bit of time and see if I can find some work as an English teacher. So if you know anything about that, feel free to message me and ask me questions. Send me a personal message. If you've lived in Mongolia or you are thinking of doing so, or if you're a teacher there or whatever, I'd be interested to hear your story, since I think Mongolia is definitely an interesting place to explore. So that's basically the details. Yeah, I don't think I'm leaving anything out. We did have kind of an accident over there, like a road accident. That was out in the middle of nowhere, and we had a problem with our Jeep and it sort of tipped over, and we had a few injuries, but nothing severe. So it's obviously wise to be careful if you're travelling out in the outback, but generally things are Mongolia is quite a safe country. Yeah, so that's it. I'd like to hear your comments.